Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about how even old computers can still be useful today with Linux. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, but my computer is so old, surely it's time to just upgrade to something new, right? Well, maybe not. For example, I had a laptop with just 2 gigabytes of RAM and a dual-core processor from 2010. Pretty old, right? When I tried running Windows 10 on it, it was, well, let's just say it was basically unusable. Imagine trying to run modern software on a potato, except this potato also tried to send you a bunch of notifications every few minutes. And that's coming from someone who could daily drive an old 1 gigabyte Core 2 Duo laptop. Yeah, I've seen some pretty old machines survive just fine. But anyway, I decided to try Linux instead. When I installed Ubuntu, this was a while ago, let's just say it was barely usable. The latest Ubuntu at the time was, and still is, pretty heavy on system resources. Still, it ran better than an operating system from 2015, Windows 10, originally. But the thing is that it worked better than Windows 10 did on the same machine. That proves that Windows could be faster if Microsoft actually tried to make it better. But here's the big one. Linux is free. No $140 operating system fees, no ads all over the screen. Looking at you, Microsoft. It's completely free, and unlike some other operating systems, it doesn't want you to buy anything in the middle of working. Now, if you're on the dark side, if you're using a Mac, I get it. Your Mac is probably great for looking cool in a coffee shop, or just working, until you actually need to do work anyway. But unless you're editing 8K video or performing brain surgery, you probably don't need the latest and greatest MacBook. A MacBook Air with an M1 chip, it's probably fine. But here's the secret. If you have an old Mac, an old Intel Mac, you can actually install Linux on that too. Yep, you heard me right. So if your old Mac or PC is feeling slow and sluggish, just install Linux. But be careful with your hard drive. You could accidentally delete all the data. So, I've done that before and it's not fun. So why is it that Windows and macOS feel so slow when Linux is so much faster? First, let's talk about Windows telemetry. Fun fact, the telemetry features in Windows actually take up more RAM than Windows 2000 did. 32 megabytes of RAM just to send your data to Microsoft. That's a lot of performance for something most people don't even realize is running in the background. And then there's the desktop environment. Windows is packed with a ton of features and still manages to not have what I need that many of us never use, which just eats your performance. Yum, tastes your RAM and CPU. With Linux, you have the option to choose a much lighter desktop environment that doesn't eat as much performance. In fact, this script you're reading right now was written on a 2011 MacBook Air. And guess what? It works perfectly fine. Linux is just that good. Another benefit of Linux, it doesn't actively annoy you to pay for anything. This app has stopped working because you didn't pay us money, or no upgrade to Windows 11, right, Microsoft? You need to work on that. And unlike Windows and macOS, Linux just lets you work. So what should you do with your old laptop if it's still running fine but feeling a bit slow? Well, if it's doing just what you need, maybe you don't need to switch to Linux, unless it's running like Windows XP or Vista or an ancient version of macOS. In that case, Linux might be a good idea. But if your old laptop's just gathering dust in the attic, why not try installing Linux and see what happens? You might be surprised at how much life you can breathe back into it. One of the best things about Linux is that it doesn't come with all the bloatware and useless junk that Windows has. The apps and services that slows everything down. With Linux, you can get a much cleaner, streamlined experience, usually. And you definitely won't have to deal with the annoyances that comes with macOS. Sorry, not sorry, Apple fans. And here's something interesting. Have you noticed how big companies are always trying to push you to buy more products? Like the way that Apple discontinues Macs so quickly, or that you have hardware requirements for Windows 11. Looking at you, Microsoft. It's almost as if they want you to keep upgrading whether you need to or not. But with Linux, that's not the case. You can take an old computer and give it a second life without needing to buy a whole new machine. And you don't need 16 gigabytes of RAM for most things too. Now you might be thinking, Linux is just for hackers, right? Actually no. Well, mostly no. I'm kidding. Linux is not just for hackers though. Of course, most hackers use it because it's more secure, if you make it secure. But in reality, it's not really too hard to learn. if you use a more user-friendly one like Ubuntu or Linux Mint. And it's not that hard to use. And here's a really nice thing. You don't even have to use an account to have Linux. Just make a USB drive, boot into it, and boom, you're using Linux. No sign-ins, no subscription, just the freedom to use the computer however you want to. Plus, most of the software available for it is free and open source. So, who doesn't love free stuff? And because it's open source, you don't have to worry about big corporations spying on you. That's a really nice feature. So why not give Linux a try? It's free, it's fast, and it's pretty easy to set up. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Thanks for what? Wait, what? You don't want to switch to Linux? You just want to keep using your computer? Well, I guess we can still try a few things to make it better. I guess. I prefer Linux if you couldn't tell. First of all, if you're using any operating system on a spinning hard drive, you're in for a bad time. If you switch to even a cheap SSD, your computer will feel a lot faster. It's like going from a donkey to an old horse. Yeah, Linux isn't exactly magic, but it can help it a lot. You can usually upgrade the hardware inside of a desktop or sometimes even a laptop and get more performance for much less money than buying an older computer. But now on the Mac side, well, you're probably not going to be upgrading the hardware unless it's really old. But don't worry, Apple fans, if your Mac is just a bit out of support, you can still install more modern versions of macOS using tools like the OpenCore Legacy Patcher. It might require just a teeny bit of technical knowledge, but it shouldn't be too hard. I've never done it myself, but I've seen people do it. So. Oh, and I almost forgot, you can install Windows, macOS, and Linux all on the same machine, at least on a Mac, and switch between them whenever you want. It's called dual booting, and it's a great way to have all the options at your fingertips. Also, just a quick note, I'm recording this under a pile of blankets, so that's why it sounds like I'm recording this under a pile of blankets. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you give Linux a try. See you in the next video.